Good evening and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns short news here for Thursday, June 20th, 2019. My name's Tom Luongo. We've got a lot to talk about tonight. We've got some very sobering things to talk about, and I know I don't normally do these ad hoc ones this late at night, but nope, I was busy all day. So here we are, and I'll wait for a few people to get into the stream. While I do so, we'll do the thing. So tonight we're going to talk about Iran, Trump, the drone incident and all of that happened yesterday. We're going to try and unpack some of the things we know, some of the things we don't know, and float some scenarios as to what I think is going on, or what possibly could be going on. And what I'll give you is, I think, my most preferred scenario. But before we do that, of course, you can follow my work over tomluongo.me. There are links in the description of the video down below. Please, if this is your first time here, please like and subscribe. I'm testy. I'm profane, but it is what it is, and it's challenging, and it should be challenging. Nothing should be easy in this life. I'll probably say something you don't like, and I'll probably say something that you do like. All right, but all the links are down below, so you can follow my work over tomluongo.me. You can also follow me on Strategic Culture as well as moneymarkets.com, and also you can sign up for the Gold, Goats, and Guns investment newsletter, where we tie up all the geopolitics into a nice, big kind of portfolio strategy to handle all the things that are happening. Because, of course, this incident between Iran and the United States over shooting down a drone has massive implications for capital markets, some of which we'll touch on maybe later in the stream. And you can sign up for that over at Patreon/Gold, Goats, and Guns. All right, so let's talk what happened yesterday. So we know that an American drone was shot down over international waters, apparently, to the best of our ability. I was speaking with a friend of mine today, and he said, literally, call me provincial, but I don't believe that the United States trots out 3-star generals to openly lie. So the best thing to do here is to assume that Iran did indeed shoot down an American drone over international waters. That in and of itself is potentially, obviously, could easily be considered an act of war. Of course, the sanctions and the oil embargo and everything else that the United States have done to Iran are also acts of war. They are. We don't like to admit that they are because we're Americans, but they are. And so it's easy for everybody at this point in time to overreact. And so now the question is, what happened and why? And I'm going to give you 3 scenarios over the course of the next maybe 15 minutes or so as to what I think is happening, what I think could have happened. The most likely, I wouldn't say the least likely. They're all very, very plausible, but I have one that I think is more plausible than others. So let's start with the first one. We've talked about this in previous live streams. We've talked about this on my blog as well, that both Moon of Alabama, Bernard over at Moon of Alabama, and Elijah Magnier have both floated the idea that Iran is now kind of unleashed with the way things have been set up, with Trump sending Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan to Tehran to try and negotiate with the Iranian government, as well as the German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas, both showing up. It's very obvious that Trump does not want a war with Iran. And that when a country like the United States has overextended itself in trying to put as much pressure on another country as possible, and the way we've done it, sanctions, tariffs, embargoes, threatening our neighbors, weaponizing the dollar, all of it, right? Moving military assets and moving naval assets and moving air assets and all of this stuff. All of that is an overextension. All of that is saying too much, right? And if you watch this channel often enough, you'll know that I'm a very big fan. I have been, for most of my adult life, involved in martial arts, and I understand what happens when a fighter gets overextended, right? Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, is a master of judo, and judo is all about taking advantage of an opponent's misdistributed weight and then reversing them and putting them on the ground or whatever they're going to do to them. but most martial arts is that way. It doesn't matter if you're doing a standing art or a grappling art. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, body mechanics rule, and an overextension is your opening to counterattack your opponent. And in geopolitics and in strategic and tactical maneuvering in geopolitics and any kind of gameplay, it doesn't matter if it's chess or some crazy German Euro that I play on Wednesday nights with my friends, they're all the same principles apply. And so in this scenario, in scenario number one, if from Iran's perspective, they've been waiting for the United States to go one step too far. And did we go one step too far last week with trying to frame Iran for firebombing oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman? I think so. And I think that put Trump in a very ugly position where he either has to go along with being effectively frog marched to war by his cabinet and deep state elements and Israeli elements and Saudi elements towards a war he doesn't want, or he has to back off. And if that's the case, then that gives Iran just that much room to maneuver to escalate and dare the Americans to retaliate. And if the Americans don't retaliate, then what? Right? It's classic countering a bully. The United States has been acting like a bully, and the bully's been exposed to everybody that now the bully is the bad guy. Even though the bully's been telling everybody, no, I'm bullying this guy because he's awful and he's mean and he's horrible. And then we turn around, we realize, everybody looks up and goes, but you're the one beating the crap out of him. Well, I'm beating the crap out of him for your good. No one's buying that argument anymore when Iran is now, when there's the real potential, for the lifeblood of the global economy, oil, to have its supply disrupted. And everybody's economies go to crap. And everybody's political systems become fragile. And it's all because of a pissing contest between the United States, Trump administration, and the mullahs who run Iran. Now, at some point, someone has to escalate to a level that is unacceptable relative to the scale of the conflict. And at that point, if they're overextended, then their opponents can use that as a means by which to continually back them off, poke them. Oh, look, he's not going to respond. Poke him again, not respond. Now, was this that incident? Very possible. This was a drone. If the IRGC and the Iranian government, if they're working together on this, if they're on the same page here. Again, this is a scenario. I'm not saying this is the reality. This is the scenario. If these things are true, then it's very possible that this was a calculated move by Iran to test Trump's resolve and test to see if they can actually force a split between Trump and his cabinet. Because now we're dealing with the reality. We're dealing with the reality of gold trading at nearly $1,400 an ounce now, with oil prices starting to rise again uncomfortably. Okay? Which are all things, certainly oil, which are all things that the Saudis, the Emiratis, the UAE, the Saudis, and Israel want. Israel wants more tension between the United States and Iran. Israel would be very happy with a war between the United States and Iran. They made their bones very clear about this. The Saudis want $90 a barrel oil again. Trump doesn't want $90 a barrel oil. So the Iranians understand this. This is a chess move. I said last week that I thought that this was an opportunity for Iran to have taken a rook or a knight off the table. And now they can push the pawn. Or now they can bring their bishop to bear or whatever. I'm not a huge chess guy, but you understand what I'm talking about. So, what's the deal? So is that the deal? Because if that is the case, this will be the last incident of this type between the US and Iran. Because anything higher than this, any further escalation, Iran is not going to shoot down drones in international waters with the United States for very long. They're not going to be able to get away with this twice. Once, yes. Spook everybody. Spook oil traders. Spook currency traders. Spook everybody. See a massive flight to quality all across all the capital markets for 48 hours, moving into next week, moving into quarter end. We're moving into the end of Q2 with the end of June coming up. All these things, don't kid yourself. The Iranians understand this stuff. So do the Chinese, so do the Russians, so do the Americans. Everybody understands what the stakes are here. Everybody understands that the capital markets are incredibly fragile. Okay, why do you think the Federal Reserve was out there yesterday saying how dovish they were going to be going forward? Most likely you're going to have to lower interest rates at full employment. Well, the economy is roaring and it's all great, but we have to lower interest rates. Why? Right? Everything is fragile right now. As much as the markets don't want, as much as the central planners and the people in charge and everything don't want us to believe that everything is fragile, everything is actually very, very fragile. So you push this economy, this global economy, just a little bit more from where Trump's already pushed it with all the sanctions and the tariffs and the weaponizing the dollar and everything else, boop, and the whole thing could collapse. That's scenario number one. Scenario number two, the IRGC has gone rogue and there's internal strife between the IRGC and the mullahs. And the IRGC is pissed off, angry, and doesn't know what else to do given what's happened and given the passivity of the Iranian government in the face of the Israelis wiping out their commanders left and right in the Syrian battlefield, given that their funding has been cut off because of because the civil government made its bed with unreliable partners like Russia, like China, because Russia and China are not reliable partners in this scenario vis-a-vis Iran. They're partners at some level, but they're not partners when it comes to fighting the United States. Russia could have done more here if they wanted to, but they're not going to. So the IRGC could just have finally said, fuck this, we've had enough. This is enough. Enough is enough. We're not going to allow this to continue. And it's not a rational scenario. I don't give that a lot of credence, but it's something that you have to consider. I don't think Soleimani is that kind of person. But again, just like Trump's not really in charge of his foreign policy, Soleimani might not be in charge of his lower order officers at this point. So it's something to consider. Now the third one. And to me, this third scenario is probably the most likely. As follows. Because this one, motive, means, opportunity, and everything. Not that the first one doesn't have motive, means, and opportunity. It does. Number three. The drone that was flying on its normal course across the southern border of Iran was being shadowed by one of our stealth drones. Which all it has to do then is veer off into Iranian airspace, flip on its transponder for 4 or 5 seconds and cause panic, turn it back off, go dark, and then the wrong drone gets shot down. That implies all sorts of things. Given Trump's comments at his press conference this afternoon, which I watched Mandy Bombard's body language segment on it, which, by the way, wasn't all that good. Mandy is usually much better than that. I've become less and less impressed with her as time has gone along. But listening to the way Trump talked about it and listening to the words used and the body language and everything else, it seems to me, Mandy watched the whole video. She was, because of her own personal biases, because she thinks she's a Q-tard, doesn't want to say what actually needs to be said, which is that Trump is uncomfortable with the line of questioning he had to deal with today because he knows at a fundamental level this was our fault. And he doesn't know how to extricate himself from this situation. That he's being frog marched to war by his advisors, by his supposed allies, who he's gone out of his way for, to give them everything they want. Same day that the bill cutting off further weapons flow to the Saudis went through the Senate. 7 Republicans, including Rand Paul and Lindsey Graham, and then the regular rhinos, all voted for it. Trump now has to veto. Will he veto it? He found out that this was a setup to get Trump to overreact. Same way he overreacted to Khan Shaykhun, the same way he overreacted last year over the chemical weapons attacks, both times he bombed Syria. Motive means opportunity, and the fact that these people are very smart, but they're not very clever. They do the same goddamn thing every time. Also remember, we're only 9 months out from the shoot down of the Russian Elant plane over Latakia, which could not have been shot down by the S-200 that the Russians said shot the thing down. It was shot down by either the French or the British, and the Israelis performed the cover action in order to try and get NATO to come into Syria. That was the plan. It's been well established. Joaquin Flores went through the freaking thing, the capabilities and the timeline on Fort Russ News. I wrote an article for Strategic Culture detailing all of this stuff. It's very obvious that was a false flag operation to start World War III over Syria. And both Netanyahu and Putin crafted a shaggy dog story to back us away from the brink. And I'll tell you something else. Trump knows about that. It's why Nikki Haley was fired. Because I'm convinced that she was the one passing the information back and forth through the UN to set all this shit up and get around him. Just 2 days later, she was gone. Notice how she hasn't been, no hide nor hair has not been heard from her since. They thought they were going to get away with it. They thought they were going to get NATO in because what they were hoping for was the Russians to respond by then attacking the frigate, the French frigate that actually fired the missile, which downed the plane because the Russians knew who did it. Which would then force them to do something about it. We could then claim fog of war and all the things that we claimed, but NATO would move into Syria. And don't think for a second that this incident doesn't smell of the same bullshit. So if that's the case, and then listen to the words Trump said. He kept saying big mistake. Somebody made a big mistake. He wouldn't say Iran, the country, made a big mistake. A guy made a big mistake. That's your big tell right there. He knows goddamn well that some poor schmuck panicked because he saw something he shouldn't have seen because he was goaded into seeing the wrong thing. Because this is how close we are at this point. Because if that had been a manned plane, what would Trump's response be here? Trump would have to respond. Okay. This scares the crap out of me. This scares the crap out of me. The implications of what I just laid out should scare you to death, because in every way, it tells you that the people who are disloyal to Trump within his own administration will not rest until they get what they want. They are willing to risk all-out fucking war to bind Trump's hands, and they get a win either way. They either get him out of office in November of 2020 and put somebody in who's more pliable, or they get a war. They get a quagmire in Iran. So I want you to think about this carefully. Remember, Trump is going to meet with both Putin and Xi at the G20 in about, 5-7 days? Next weekend. Right? Next week? Be the first face-to-face meeting between Trump and Putin since Helsinki. There are a lot of people out there who don't want that meeting to go off, and if it does go off, they don't want it to come to any conclusion whatsoever. And John Bolton has gone out of his way to blow up every single major summit that Trump has been involved in since he became National Security Advisor. He contradicts Trump at every turn. If John Kirikow is right, then Bolton is on thin ice. Bolton's guy, Patrick Shanahan, is out as head of the DOD. Sheldon Adelson is really worried that he's not going to get his war with Iran. And Trump is powerless to stop it. You could see it on his face. You could see it in his shoulders. You could see it everywhere. And Mandy Bombard sat there and wouldn't say what was actually happening. I could see it, and I'm untrained. But I'm a better political analyst than Mandy, so therefore, it's pretty obvious what's got Trump worried. And now the question is, how is he going to extricate himself from this? I don't know that he can. And I know a lot of people are convinced nothing's going to come of this, and maybe not. Maybe Trump will be able to hold everybody off for a few months. But Iran is not going to. But then that ties right back into number one, which is now Iran will then continue to turn around and apply asymmetric pressure to the United States and to the Saudis and to the UAE and to Israel. It actually ties into all three scenarios, because the IRGC is not going to take any of this lying down. From what I understand, they've moved their advisors back up to the border of the Golan Heights after Putin worked judiciously to get them to move back 100 kilometers, and then fucking Netanyahu wouldn't keep his dick in his pants and wouldn't stop wiping out Iranian assets all over Syria the last 2 or 3 months, because he was worried that he wasn't going to be able to keep Trump on. But he wasn't going to be able to keep Trump on point, on program. The one who I've never seen you before, but I'm going to start looking through the comments. And the one asks, "Am I an Austrian?" Well, I'm Italian by birth. I'm an Austrian by economic theory. So yes, I'm a libertarian Austrian economist. The rest of it. Jim Rissatelli says, "Hey, Tom, where's your decaf?" Right here. It is decaf tonight. All right, let me look through what some of you guys have been saying. I might have missed a couple of important comments or tidbits of news, because you guys are really good at that. So just give me a second. Thank you, Mojo Jojo, for saying that these streams keep getting better and better. I appreciate that. I wouldn't say I work hard at it, but I work hard at what I know. Now it's just a matter of presenting it in a more coherent manner on a regular basis, but I appreciate it. Mark Damon, late to the show. I've had a beer or eight. Dude, on a day like this, it only calls for whiskey. Thomas Lee asked, did I hear correctly that Iran switched to the euro, i.e. oil sales, RE oil sales? All three. The yuan, the ruble, and the euro. But the question is whether the European banks will actually do business with Iran or not. I can tell you right now that Russia's SWIFT alternative is going to get a lot of customers over the course of the next few months. As this, you got to remember that that's another secondary effect of package number one, of scenario number one, which is that if Iran is escalating in an asymmetric way to destabilize the oil markets and destabilize the capital markets, which is where the United States is weak, they're not weak militarily vis-a-vis Iran. Okay, if this shooting match happens between us and Iran, a whole lot of Iranians are going to die. That whole western half of the country will be sent back to the Stone Age. Okay, it will be bad. And remember that you have a lot of generational bias and you have a lot of grudges that need to be, there's just a lot of imprinting and grudges, right? Martin Armstrong had a great blog the other day about World War I, World War II, World War III, and he was asked directly, what time frame would you see, his war cycle peaking? He said between 2024 and 2027, and he said, and then he went a little bit of history and in a very broad stroke said that that World War I and World War II both came about because of generational grudges that are held between France and Germany and this one and then all of those things. They couldn't get rid of them, and the people involved couldn't get rid of them. The people in power couldn't get away from their imprinting, the grudges that they held against, other groups of people. In the same way, the United States, that baby boomers in the United States have a grudge to settle against the Russians for the Cold War. They can't let it go. So many people in America I talk to all the time can't let it go. Oh, there's goddamn freaking evil Ruskies. What are you talking about? They're not communists anymore. How many people do you hear? You flip through the comments, the vitriol of comments on Zero Hedge, and there's all the Chi-Coms this and the this, that, and every freaking, and it's all the most racist crap I've ever heard. They can't get away from the fact that the Chinese Communist Party is about as communist as the Republicans are. They just don't hold elections. They're not communists. People are as crony capitalists as we are, if not worse. If anything, they're fascists. But, that word's been misused. So, but don't underestimate that portion of this. That at a certain level, John Bolton fucking hates Iran, and John Bolton hates Russians, and that's it. And he hates Chinese. That's it. That's it. That's all there is. He thinks our system is great and they suck and they need to be wiped off the face of the planet. That's it. And it's not any deeper than that with these people. All they do is after that. It's just ad hoc, post hoc, justification for their behavior. That's all it is. Because that's what 99% of that's what people do on a day-to-day basis anyway. It's 99% of how we react to the world anyway. We don't think anything through. We do something and then we post hoc why we did it. It's the way our brains function. We act because we want to act, and then we, come up with, then the left brain just kind of comes up with a fucking rationale for it later. You listen to people argue. I mean, I listen to people argue about friggin'. I listened to them arguing on Twitter the other day with a fucking schmuck who calls himself a free marketeer and a libertarian, telling me that tariffs and sanctions were good. Like, okay, arguing with another guy who still thinks that Bitcoin is just an idea and it's imaginary. Like, really? Electrons are imaginary. Well, you can't hold one. Well, your fucking hand is made up of hundreds of quadrillions of them. You hold them every day. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, people just make up arguments. It's like, I don't like Bitcoin because I don't like Bitcoin because I like gold. Okay. Not a good reason. But it's what people do. And it's the same thing with John Bolton. It's the same thing with Mike Pompeo. This is their imprinting. This is who they are. Donna says, I'm so glad to know that you and I are on the same page when it comes to Mandy. Number 3 choice has been my thinking. I agree. I mean, I like Mandy when she's not making excuses for Trump. If we get bogged down with Iran, says Hypatia, I bet China is going to make a move for Taiwan. Very possible. It is absolutely essential, Jonathan, that Jonathan Gillespie says that Trump meet with Putin again. But the question is, again, they can't. You got to remember, we're also talking about some other very interesting things when we talk about Trump and Putin, because then you can't like ignore Ukraine, Browder, Kharkovsky, the whole freaking MI5, MI6, all of that shit. You can't take that out of the equation, that these people would start a war with Iran to keep Bill Browder from going to fucking jail for expose and being exposed to sing about the attempted rape of Russia and the billions of dollars that those people stole in the whole 9 yards. I mean, no one wants that narrative to die. No one wants that narrative to go away. Don't put it beyond these people to do this shit, because they're that evil. Umpire's Post says, what about the people saying China is trying to dominate the world? They are trying to dominate. That's a good way of, that's one way of putting it. But the people who generally talk about China wanting to dominate the world are people who have the worldview of world domination, because that's the only way they can see things. Remember, beyond post hoc rationalization, there's also just everyday freaking projection. I don't want to rule the world, so I look at people like I look at countries like Russia, Iran, and China. My default position is that they're being aggressed. Right? That's my default position. It may be a bias of mine. It may be a shortcoming of mine, because I'm not a person who's interested in ruling the world. I don't conceive of how other people would want to rule the world. And then I look and I see the people who are ruling the world and what they're doing to maintain that power. And then it only makes sense to me to take the other side of the narrative and try and explain their reactions to this, to these, to those initiation, those actions themselves, right? So if China is going to take over the world, which is a very dubious way of putting it, or it's a very, I think, inaccurate way of putting it, it's not going to be built on the same colonial style model that we Western Europeans employ. It'll be a different model, because it's a different culture, it's a different way of thinking, and it's a different way of approaching things. But because at the end of the day, all we're really talking about is people who are currently in power, scared to death of losing that power. They'll use whatever justification they have, and they will always project what they want to do or what they are doing onto everybody else. Yeah, Arkball has a great way of putting it. It's China's trying to reorient the world as opposed to dominate it. And I would look at it, that's the way I would look at it. And I don't mean orient with a capital O, but that the world needs to be reoriented away from a unipolar power like the United States. Thomas Lee says he agrees, saying that all those countries I mentioned, that would be Iran, China, Russia, to a lesser extent, and others, have all dealt with their own existential reality in the last year, where their societies went through an existential crisis over the last century and a half. Unlike the U.S., the U.S. has not undergone an existential crisis, and even the Civil War I would consider an existential crisis. I would consider it an extension of a couple hundred years of European colonialism. I know it was a bad joke, but it's actually not a bad way of putting it. Once the world drops the dollar and goes back to gold, we're fucked. I don't know that we're going to go back to gold, the one. That's a topic for a different day. I don't mean for this to go much longer. We're 35 minutes. I usually kind of want to start wrapping this one up from here. But gold will be remonetized in some way. And most likely via some form of crypto tokenization. but it will not circulate freely, as it were, right? Central banks are buying gold on a safe haven trade. I'm not saying that gold is not going to be remonetized. We are not going to be transacting in gold coins ever again. Not going to happen. They're not liquid enough. They're not fungible enough. It's not going to happen. There's a reason why we have the kind of technology and money that we have today. There's a reason why most dollars are digital. There's a reason for these things, and it's not all just corruption. There's a need for it. If there wasn't a need for it, it would have failed. But the problem is that the technology to properly tokenize and properly utilize gold as a reserve asset itself became a problem. Technology wasn't there to allow gold to freely, adequately, the better word, adequately express the subtlety of the division of labor in the global economy. That's the best way of putting it. Okay. But we have that technology today. So the world is going to change. Oh, I believe there's going to be, there already is. Gold is actually already backing a lot of currencies. I mean, don't kid yourself. The question here is, I mean, remember, the dollar is backed by about 18% to M2, FYI. Just kind of saying. Not really much better than the Russians. The Russians are about 21%. The Canadians are fucked. They're at 0.05%, something like that. 0.1%. The point is, during a time of monetary upheaval, he who has adequate gold reserves will be able to reestablish confidence in their currency faster. That's what gold will do. Now, whether they remonetize gold and reintroduce gold convertibility in this current regime, are you crazy? All you would do is watch at these prices, all that would happen is all your gold would flow right out of your treasury. And there's no way to stop it because the Russians, for example, don't command enough power over the financial institutions to be able to stop the outflow. And all that gold that they so assiduously accumulated over the last 5 years would fly out the door in 3 months. Believe me, if the Russians were to put their 2,000 tons of gold up on the market tomorrow, it would get bought at $1,400 an ounce. We'll get into the money stuff another night. I don't want to do that now. We maybe talk about that tomorrow night. Okay, I'm going to go. I actually would prefer to do that in a full stream where I can give a full accounting of this. And I did a stream recently. The one I did on Facebook on Monday covers a lot of this ground as well. So you might want to check that out for those of you who are new. But yeah, I would. Well, let me put together some notes to actually do this from the ground up, because I have a lot of thoughts on this, a lot to talk about here. There's a lot to unpack, and I don't think this is the right forum for me to do it kind of ad hoc right now. All right. So, gold in the ground is irrelevant. Only gold that's been refined and stored is relevant. Gold in the ground is not an economic asset. It's also not a monetary asset. Just like oil in the ground isn't a monetary asset. Venezuela just proved that with the failure of the petro. All right, I'm gonna bolt for the evening, guys. So this has been fun. I really appreciate everybody stopping by. Look, we got 74 people in an ad hoc stream on 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. I think it's great. If you like what you heard tonight, please give a like and subscribe down below if you can. If you haven't installed Brave as your browser in order to get around all of Google and YouTube's bullshit, I absolutely recommend you do so. It allows you to, 1, stop being tracked all over the freaking world, and 2, allows you to accumulate BAT tokens, Ethereum-based token, which you can then use to tip your favorite YouTubers or your favorite bloggers or whomever. I'm a verified publisher on Brave. You can do so right now, and many others are as well. They're putting on somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 people a day, and so and that ad network, the more valuable it gets, the more valuable we as content creators become, and more powerful you as the content consumers become. And we cut the middleman out of the whole fucking thing, and we tell these people to go fuck themselves, because that's exactly what needs to happen. So you guys have a great night. We'll talk soon. We will talk tomorrow night, 8:30 here. We'll probably talk money, because what else are we going to talk about? You guys take care. You be well. Keep your stick on the ice.